Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Billboard. I am Charlie Riley, head of marketing at OneScreen, who's powering this podcast. And I'm joined with my co host and our chief commercial officer and one of the co founders of OneScreen, Greg Wise, rocking looks like one of the old school OneScreen hats. I like that.
Old school logo. This is one of the first logos. But hey, y'all, thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, we've got a great episode. As a marketer, though, the brand police, we might have to talk about that because when you we can discuss. But we got an awesome guest here, a friend of ours, and one of the nicest marketers and a really smart guy that we'll have some great conversations with. Jonathan Gandolf, the CEO of Audience Plus. You can introduce yourself, but I'm sure everyone that's watching this already knows who you are or subscribes to all your work. But let everybody know a little bit about what you've been up to.
Charlie, I will be Venmoing you for those nice words. I appreciate all of the exaggerations there, maybe a little bit, but yes, thanks for having me. Jonathan here, CEO of Audience Plus, as you mentioned, co-founder of The Juice. We recently acquired Audience Plus and rebranded to Audience Plus, but we're a B2B content platform. We help brands publish content, distribute content, and then convert from the content their team is already creating. Big fans of OneScreen. I've had an interesting marketing journey myself, B2B, B2C, have done some out of home. I think it's a pretty cool tactic and strategy that more brands should be leveraging. Appreciate you having me on and excited to chat today.
Yeah, you've done a lot. Your platforms are excellent to distribute content. You've kind of touched on all the maybe mediums that there have been. I guess talk a little bit about, if you don't mind jumping into, you distribute content you across the board, but what we do at OneScreen, we work with brands for out of home. How do you see the digital content that your team works with day in and day out? How do you see that translate to the real world when you think about billboards and transit ads and such? You've seen it both ways as an executioner, but also just a purveyor of marketing. What's your take on that? How do you see those things working together?
Yeah, I think we as marketers have done it to ourselves, and I say we, myself included, where we spend so much time, energy, and effort creating content, and then such little thought, or comparatively little thought, goes into the actual distribution strategy or the promotion strategy. It's like promotion or production versus promotion, right? And I think there's all sorts of different ways to distribute content, but we too often get judged or are judged by the amount of content we're creating, or we've got to publish 5 blog posts this month or else. And it doesn't really matter, right? Like, I'd rather have one really good blog post and distribute it really well and ensure it gets in front of the right audience, as opposed to 5 blog posts that don't get in front of the right audience. And I think I'm in the B2B space now. I think it's important as we think about that audience. We, again, as marketers, have like probably over indexed on purely digital in the B2B space. And I think inbound marketing was great. And I think marketers flocked to that playbook and optimizing those digital channels. But just because you're in a B2B sales motion, that person is still driving home from work, still going grocery shopping, still they are buyers all throughout 24 hours a day. And if you can get your brand in front of them, whether that's through digital content or in the real world out of home, certainly worth doing. And in the B2B space, I think that competition for attention and literally inventory in the out of home space is probably the barriers far lower than in some of these really noisy digital channels.
How do you feel about the state of marketing? It's a loaded question we like to ask all of our guests.
That's a big loaded question. I gotta go.
Tell me everything you know about marketing, Jonathan. No, but like the state of marketing, where are we? I feel like it's such a great topic of conversation. I think we're in a little bit of purgatory. I don't want to use the word confusion, but I feel like there's a lot of marketers that have come out of this like 2010, 2020 era. Define that era however you want. To me, marketing became a little bit of a finance gig to some
Yeah.
degree.
Yeah.
And now I think there's a little bit of a revert back to old school creativity, brand. Out of home is certainly a part of that. What are you seeing? What are you hearing?
I'll tell you what I'm hearing and what kind of confuses me about it is, and we've been guilty of it ourselves. We say there's a need for a new playbook. Everyone's saying the old playbooks
Yeah.
don't work. And I think they're referencing a lot of paid and performance channels, SEO being disrupted in a really big way. And we're all talking about this is the new playbook. This is the new playbook. And what confuses me about that is, A, I don't think we know what the new playbook is. B, if we did, everybody's going to be doing it. And it's just going to diminish the impact of that playbook anyway. And I think there's so much noise. And I think marketers, the best marketing I've ever done has been because I've had a really great relationship with our sales team, right? That sales lead, marketing leader kind of relationship, I think, is so critical. I think we as marketers should stop trying to define like successful marketing by what other marketers are saying is successful. And it really needs to start internally. What's success for your sales team, your customer success team, your executive team? I think too often we jump to like tactics and optimizing things before we define it internally, which sounds like a very basic advice, but you're right. I think there are some brands zigging when others are zagging and leaning more into brand and creative now. And I love that work. That work's inspirational,
Yeah.
beautiful, really fun, but it also might not be right. I used to work in the healthcare analytics space, and our buyer, you had to, for better or worse, you had to go shake their hand and look them in the eye, right? So that meant events was our primary go-to-market channel and would always be. And so I think it's just so much of marketing has this extrinsic, like, what are other marketers doing? What is the industry doing? And I think we skip the part of like internally, how do we define marketing? How is it successful? And then just do whatever it takes to hit that and make sure you're measuring it and iterating as you go.
But also, your ICP is likely different than someone else's ICP. We were at an event. I won't name the name. It was a great event, and you had a panel, and all three were representative of a high growth tech startup, and it was like each one had a different approach, and each one had a very different ICP. Hey, like outbound is working. Well, it's not for me.
Right.
Well, it is for me. I'm going after heads of sales or whatever. I'm making this
Right.
up, right? But the other person's outbound doesn't work to go reach engineers. So we're in Reddit threads. Only we're
Yeah.
on the dark web. Cool, that works for you, but it's not going to work to go after marketers.
Yeah, I've heard there's an analogy I'm going to mess up here, but somebody said it would be comparative to if somebody said, I love scuba diving. And they're like, how does scuba diving work? And they're like, you buy scuba gear and you go jump in the ocean and you're scuba diving. And so there's a lot of ocean where you can scuba dive and see absolutely nothing. Like you have to go to where the fish are. Like you're saying, if you're a great performance marketer, you know your channels, etc. But if your buyer isn't on those channels, then it doesn't freaking matter, right? Like you have to go to where
Yeah.
the fish are. And I think there's a lot of digital fatigue, both from the marketing, like execution perspective, as well as, dude, like I've even noticed it personally lately. It's like, where do I go to get good content anymore? Everything's algorithmized. I think I just made up that word, but it's like, and people can
Trademark it
hear,
now.
yeah, they can roast me for my, my like for you on Twitter is like, I find nothing. And I know that's supposedly based on my behavior, but I don't know who's behaving like that. You go to LinkedIn and it's the same 6 takes over and over again, just in different words. I'm like, oh, get me out of here a little bit. Like, where do I find something that's actually meaningful? I found myself honestly like reading books more just because it's like an escape and I feel healthier when I'm done. So I don't know. That was a deep dive into a pretty simple question, but
You,
it's very real.
you just, by the way, with the deep dive, you just rounded out the whole analogy with scuba diving. I don't even think
Yeah.
you knew it.
Yeah, I did not. That was unintentional.
Well
I
done.
think the industry calls it's a callback. I think when you bring that joke back, well done. Yeah,
Yeah.
and
I
I
came
do.
up for air.
Oh, he'll be here all week. Tip your bartenders. I do love your point about I will go on and on about internal marketing the same way. I think that's I've talked about that forever. I think that's extremely important. And to get that feedback from your sales team to understand what conferences their prospects or customers are going to, because there's, not to bring it back to out of home, but there's an out of home play there. There's
Yep.
executions there. I think that's vital. And I think that's a really good point. I do want to touch on what you said before, though, like that, and maybe it was Greg, though, talking about that panel. Everyone's different. And or maybe you, Jonathan, you said this, where it's like everyone sees what their competitors are doing. It's just like a game of catch up. We've found that some brands who have been first to market with out of home, when it's maybe not considered, what's a B2B SaaS company, like why would they do billboards? That like they've seen traction from that. I think, do you have any thoughts about like when's a good time to start or when's a good time to try a different channel? It doesn't just have to be out of home, but like when you are thinking about zigging when the others are zagging or doing something first to market, like you said, maybe that's an opportunity to not look the same as everybody else.
Yeah, I know I just kind of talked about brand and creative and not following playbook. What I'm not saying is you shouldn't be measuring your marketing investment. And I'm very fortunate. I got into marketing through the data analysis world. I was a data analyst at a big marketing company. And so like that was just like, I didn't realize that was a unique experience, but I think marketers, we have to do a better job of measuring and justifying our investments, which again, maybe sounds counter to some of what I was saying earlier, but really what I'm just saying is know what's working and what's not working. And I think Like, I am also a big believer where like marketers, like, you don't need to be in every channel. You only need to be in the channels that are performing for you. And if you're not measuring that, then you're wasting resources. So to answer your question directly, I think marketers should be measuring what they're investing. And as soon as you start to see that law of diminishing returns, start to experiment with other channels. You'll find one, shift your chips there, right? I always tell our team, we're a small scale up, like you all are at One Screen, like, we've been given chips and there's a finite amount of them and we need to place bets. But as soon as we know there's a winning bet, let's shift chips there and go all in there as fast as we can, as hard as we can, until it stops giving us the returns. And then let's move the chips back out. So I do think there's some of it should be experimentation, but you shouldn't just experiment for the sake of, oh, this is new, we don't know if it'll work. You need to say, this is new. This is how we will define whether or not it does or does not work.
Collective we, by the way, has to include, Charlie hears me say this ad nauseum, but I think he and I agree. Jonathan, you'll agree. The we must include executive leadership, and in certain cases, the board.
Yep.
Because for folks listening that are in the B2B high growth tech space or B2C, D2C, whatever it is, if you're backed by VC, you have a board, right? The reality is they're going to ask what you got from marketing spend. And if you are not aligned in the beginning, it's not going to be a healthy or productive conversation.
There's been this like undercurrent in the LinkedIn feed and the marketing world more broadly where like MQLs are bad, like leads are old fashioned. And I think that's like a fine opinion for marketers to rally around and maybe for marketing teams to think through. But the reality is, Greg, as you mentioned, marketing, almost no matter the size of business, marketing gets one slide in the boardroom. And what's on that slide is leads, pipeline, and spend. And like, regardless of how the marketing team gets there or measures how they themselves get there, the language it's being put in for the people in the boardroom is leads, pipeline, and spend. And like, I think like we would be foolish to talk about or think about anything else in that at that level. That's the language marketers have to learn to speak and translate into.
Yeah. And that's what I meant before, where that slide could arguably in the finances section.
Yeah, totally.
And that I think is fundamentally changing, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think marketers get it. I think, right, like your peers, you guys are the expert marketers, right? I play one on TV. But the network of these smart B2B marketers, D2C marketers, they get it. They get it. It's more about, again, my belief is convincing others in the organization and aligning on what is that measure of success. What makes this thing, yes, this was good, or it wasn't successful, but we learned something.
Right.
It goes back to internal marketing, because it just internal marketing isn't just talking with your sales team. It's selling up to the board, selling up to your C-suite. I think it's understanding in that slide, you're not showing something like our web traffic is up because great vanity metric. You're saying our dwell time is higher because we're talking to more of the right prospects that want to spend time in our environment. Like that, like you have to correlate that metric or whatever that is to what they want to understand. Like, go ahead.
Yeah, and this is me geeking out a little bit, Charlie. And I love that example you use of like website visitors being a vanity traffic, because that's the like classic or vanity metric, because that's like the classic example, right? Which it is a vanity metric if you just say, hey, our website visitors are up 10% this month. Or good marketing teams will say, hey, our website traffic is up 10% based on our conversion rate from our website traffic. We know that'll lead to this many demos. Based on demo to SQL, we know it'll lead to that many SQLs. Based on our ACV and our close rate, we know that means we should be creating this much pipeline and close. But that all has to be bubbled up to that slide that is leads and pipeline. And I think that's where like marketers we get ourselves in trouble of either not knowing that chain of events or not communicating it properly internally again. And maybe that's the main theme here we keep going back to, is like we have to know how to like articulate our own value internally to gain the equity and the trust across the business to place those bets externally.
Yeah, I think it's both of those things. If your pipes are not working correctly, if your RevOps, if all your systems are not tied together, you may not have access to that information. Nor are you going to be the classic argument of like full funnel attribution. Like it's impossible to do that. But if everything's built the right way, you can have a viewpoint of that. But then you have to, like you said, articulate that in a way that you can't speak like a marketer talks. And I think this is one of those things where marketing has to help sales understand too. It's like use the terminology that they use. Like you can't use Like, we love acronyms. We love talking like marketers. It's like our audience doesn't talk like us. Like, you have to use the verbiage that they use. I think we see sometimes with that sort of example there is someone might run an out of home campaign, and there's a lot of ways to report on that and measure effectiveness,
Yeah.
but some might say impressions, like how many people saw my billboard. But that's not the end of it. It's, are you looking at organic traffic? Because we're going to see a bump in that by those who are exposed to your billboards,
Yeah.
who are not Googling right away while they're driving by, but as soon as they get in a safe space, hopefully, then they
We
look
hope.
up your
Yeah.
brand. And then,
Yeah.
so that's a measurement piece that if you don't understand how to explain that, it's just, well, impressions are great, but that's not who you wanted to see your billboard. And by the way, these many people were searching for you after the fact. There's that long tail effect
Yeah.
that they were searching for this 2 weeks later.
On that note, which is now going to be prioritized, so like branded search terms or branded search will be more prioritized in using ChatGPT over anything else. And if that's the case, there's very specific tactics to help drive that more than others. And that's where something like buying out of home comes into play. That's like literally like the first metric that usually pops. So, anyways, to your point, there's more down funnel uptick in results that a lot of folks don't necessarily even realize.
They just need to be educated of,
Right.
here's how you measure a campaign. And if you've never run a campaign before, you don't know, you think of same thing as telling someone, oh, here our website traffic is X. Well, if you don't know to, like, that you can look down the funnel and see how landing pages are impacting maybe conversion, then that's all you know. And that's not fair for to assume others within the organization understand that. But that's why you do what you do, Greg. What really was like, you help someone understand, here's how you can measure the effectiveness of an out of home campaign and how that ties back into digital and how that ties into the distribution like Jonathan's doing and how that ties into whatever an email campaign that it all works together. It's just, you have to be able to tell that story.
And I think this is where like the last couple of years have been really tough on a lot of marketers. Budgets have decreased, teams have decreased. What's on their plate has increased, and I think a lot of marketing leadership comes from the brand and creative side, which is fantastic. Love it. But they've never been trained or armed or had the right resourcing to be able to start to measure the impact of their work. And like all of a sudden, like they're having to justify literally their role. And it's like there's a lot of friction between increasing responsibilities, increasing budgets, decreasing, CFO being more involved in fantastically talented marketers not being set up for success. I think has led to a lot of the kind of turbulence for marketers over the last year or two.
Why does everything have to be tracked? Why does it even have to be? You think about, I talk about this all the time, but think about B2B, D2C brands. When you think about the most successful brands on the planet, and we talked about how like you should never compare and do the same tactics as another company going after a different consumer. But if you think about all the successful Fortune 500, what do they have in common? What are the commonalities across the board? Brand is a significant part of their spend.
Yeah.
And it has been almost from day one. The Coke
Yeah.
and Pepsis of the world, Facebooks of the world, the Googles, the Apple, they've all done out of home and brand work from the get go.
Yeah.
Nike, everyone.
When times are good, certainly not. And even when
Right.
times are bad, you don't have to. I just think there's going to be more top down pressure. I was talking to a CMO at another company that's a customer of ours. We were at an event and said, how'd Q1 go for you? He's like, "It's our best quarter ever." I was like, "What's causing that?" He's like, "We have no idea." And so we literally sat around his leadership team and it's just like, nobody touch anything. Whatever we're doing, keep doing it. And like, there are some, it was probably some in like number of things that, little things that all of a sudden all clicked at once and it worked, and it's almost not even repeatable, right? Because it was so many little things that all happened at once. So I don't think you need to measure everything. I'd rather err on the side of measuring things than not measuring things. And again, I'm the numbers guy, so I'm probably always over indexing that way. But I think there's a lot of, I think if you measure things, you earn the right to not have to measure everything.
I think it's prohibiting for marketers. I feel like marketers could do more, want to do more. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like there's so many brilliant folks out there that want to do more, but that the fact that they have to prove
Right.
everything,
Yeah.
prove their worth to keep their job is such a limiting factor for their growth, but for the
Yeah.
company's growth. Like anyone with a brain knows that success comes with risk. Period. Ask any successful person,
Yep.
organization at some point, probably multiple times, they took a risk and did something. If you
Yeah.
are not allowed to do that, you can't really, I don't think you're going to ever break through that plateau.
No, and you got to spend money to make money, right? And not every single dollar is going to have a return. But again, if you have that big return on one bet, then it's like, all right, then let's play again with the chips. Yeah, it feels unfair. I don't know how easy for us to say as marketers, but it does feel like there's this almost unfair pressure put on marketing to justify their being versus some other channels. Or
That's your
other
CFO. That's your
teams and other
CFO
orgs.
calling, wondering where all the leads are right
Yeah,
now.
yeah, exactly. Sorry about that.
It
He's
is
like, "What did you
unfair.
just say?"
How
Yeah.
many leads have you generated from joining this podcast?
Gonna be
It is
thousands.
unfair, I think. But and I think that comes down to, this is a generalization, and this is an unfair generalization as well. This comes down to CFOs not understanding marketing. And that's fine. I think part of the problem has been marketing has been influenced by dashboards built from Google that everyone knows how to, at least at the high level or tertiary level, be able to see a Google Analytics billboard or dashboard, or a paid search dashboard that you can see in real time, and you can see cost per acquisition and whatever. Like, we're used to seeing that. And that's certain channels you can do that 100%. But when you look at the sum of all the parts and understand that part of the reason why that might have worked 5 years ago is now different from today is there is so, back to what we were talking about, there's so much content out there. There is so much education that prospects are doing on their own, and they do not want to talk to a salesperson. That funnel that we all want to push people into, our own funnel, they should come through this channel, and then we need them to talk to a salesperson on our terms, and then we need to do a demo on our terms. That is not happening. And the problem is we are trying to force that into that. And so we were able to maybe put a cost per acquisition 5 years ago to that. Back to the problem with, we caused that as marketers, we said, like, here's every dashboard possible.
Yeah.
But we know that a sales cycle is going to be longer, maybe for a different type of product, or like back to your example, that CMO not understanding, maybe there was a cyclical thing. Maybe it was things with political advertising that spend they spend millions in one year, and then they're not spending that for 4 more years. There's all these different factors that have to go into it. And I think that for us to be able to track everything is difficult, the way that everything is set up. But as marketers, we're not going to change that problem. So what we need to do is build trust that, hey, I know what I'm doing. I've built a hypothesis around this. I'm very confident in this 80% of my budget or execution that is going to be the tactics that we know work. Back to what you said, Jonathan, you're not going to be on every channel. And we're going to allocate 20% for experimentation. We're going to have a hypothesis around that. We're going to prove that. And if that doesn't work, we'll move that to the next thing. We have to prove our worth. It's a little bit unfortunate, but when others in the organization do not understand the day-to-day and the ins and outs of marketing, I love the iceberg analogy for everything. We show them this much and they don't know all that, and nor do they need to understand that. But internal education is a continual process. It's not a one-time webinar you do for one, and everyone understands what you're doing. You have to continually educate, and over time you're going to build up that trust. I will get off my soapbox because I will talk about that forever, and you guys just got me a little fired up when I love it. But I think marketers do have to measure. I think that's unfair not to, but it's a little unfair with the expectation of having to measure everything when there's a lack of marketing maturity maybe in an organization. And that's your job as a marketer, to educate as much internally as externally.
Little
I
fire
love the
hose up there.
yeah.
I'm
I
I'm
love
I'm
the
I'm a
I
little
really
fired
feel.
up.
I love the trust soapbox. I'm gonna jump on that myself, and I think you're exactly right. Like, you have to earn that trust with your team internally. I think marketers, like, we should also trust ourselves a little bit more than we do. Hey, I've got this like weird idea. I'm not real sure how we're gonna measure it, but it's the right thing to do. And because you have that trust in your team, you trust yourself, and you trust your own instincts. I always say your lived experience like doesn't fit in a spreadsheet, but if I had $1 for every time in this like founder journey where it's like I have a gut instinct, but I can't rationalize it, and so I don't do it. And then 3 months later, I go back to it. I'm like, shit, that was the right thing to do. We should have done it sooner. I think so. Yeah, I think trust is twofold, both in your team and in yourself a little bit, in your own kind of experiences and instinct as a marketer.
I don't know if this is like an obvious thing, but if you're a marketer out there, joining a new organization, looking to join a new organization, I think it's critical to clearly you have to understand the product that you sell. Ideally, like walk in the shoes of the ICP of the customer, but also ask questions in the interview process, like to the executive team. Like, how do you feel about things like what we're talking about?
Yeah.
Taking risk, things like brand, the unmeasurables. Because what we've seen with marketers that have that alignment from day one, it is a beautiful thing. It is specifically talking about doing something like out of home, which for a lot of these folks is brand new. But that alignment was already there from day one prior to even joining the organization. So much more smooth. And it's the ability to execute the campaign properly for like ultimate impact. That's it, period. It happens every time, but there's alignment. So we could probably talk about this for a long time.
This is marketing therapy. I feel like I should be laying on
Isn't
the
it?
couch.
Maybe maybe that's a good follow-up, because that's it could be a good follow-up, because I think there's a lot there. I think a lot of marketers are going through this, and I think that
Yeah, totally.
I think you bring up some really good points, Greg, that in that interview process, you need to understand their marketing maturity. You need to see if when you're interviewing the CFO, if they use the word investment or if they use sunk costs or other things that are like,
Cost center.
cost center. They look at it a little differently. You have to look at, how's the sales team structured? Are you looked upon, is this role looked upon as just servicing a sales team, or are you a true counterpart to that execution? I think there's a lot of really good points there, but I don't know. I think a lot of marketers are going through a rough time right now. I think it is fun for us, and not to go back to what we do, and probably even Jonathan, what you do, to be able to offer alternatives to maybe that playbook that they've thought has worked for a while. And they should always be experimenting. And not every channel does make sense for every brand, but there are ways to try different things within the bounds of what they're capable of. And I think, Jonathan, you brought up a really, I think we should end on that point. Just trusting yourself sometimes. Like, you're a trained professional. At the end of the day, you were hired for a reason and you know what you're doing. Doesn't mean you're going to be right. And it doesn't mean you're going to hit a home run on every execution, but you should be able to learn from that. And ideas are great. I've always said this. Everyone's on the marketing team. I love getting great ideas from someone who's in accounting or whoever. Like, that's awesome. But sometimes you do have to you put a flag in the ground and say, my expertise based and in conjunction with the reporting we can do and with what I think we're going to be able to experiment with this, here's how we're going to go about doing this, and we're going to learn from it. So we'll do some more therapy sessions. But until then, how can people find you, and what are ways they can get in touch with you?
Yes, audienceplus.com if you want to learn more about publishing, distributing, or converting on the content your team is creating. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I drop some hot or mild or lukewarm takes there. I'm always happy to connect with folks.
We really appreciate it. Yeah, this was great. And we'll definitely, we would love to have you back, and we can riff on a little bit more of what marketers are going through. But until then, thanks for joining us. And we'll have you on and a lot of other excellent guests we've got lined up. So thanks for joining us on Beyond the Billboard. And until then, we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks for having me.
See you guys.